The first thing for folks that, again, not super familiar with Florida, property tax is in our state constitution. So it can't be changed just year to year with a simple law change in the regular session. That protects local government because that's their primary source of revenue. That's why, because I always get asked, why do we have to vote on these property tax things? It seems like every 2 years. And it's because they can't change it. They have to ask us so that it's stable, it's predictable, it gives you a real reliance interest as a property owner about what the situation is going to be year to year.
Welcome to Real Hits of Real Estate, where Southwest Florida's real estate market meets local flavor. If you love real estate, local discoveries, and learning how to make smart moves while living the Southwest Florida lifestyle, you're in the right place. Hi there, and welcome back to Real Hits of Real Estate. I'm your host, Heather Hitz, and I'm so excited about today's guest. Before we dive in, let me introduce you, Matthew Caldwell. Matthew is the Lee County Property Appraiser and a former member of the Florida House of Representatives, and he brings such an incredible depth of knowledge in the real estate valuation, tax policy, and land use. He holds the highest state certification in this field, serves as an expert witness in state and federal courts, and has even taught sustainable real estate at FGCU. With everything happening in our market right now, especially around property taxes, I can't think of a better person to have on my show. So welcome, Matthew.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Heather.
So exciting. I want to start with your journey as a seventh generation Floridian. That's pretty amazing. Your family roots run deep here. How has that history in Lee County shaped your heart for public service?
Yeah, it's a great question. We, seven generations, this is 200 years. My family came actually to kind of north central Florida to Micanopy outside of Gainesville in 1826. So it's, of course, that was the edge of the frontier. There was nobody south of Paynes Prairie 200 years ago.
No.
But Southwest Florida has been home for basically my whole life, and it's been really an amazing opportunity to grow up here. You know, this region has exploded, obviously, in terms of population, and for those of us that work in the real estate industry, and as you said in my bio, for about 2 decades before I got elected to this office, I worked in private practice real estate appraisal. And it's really given me an opportunity to see all the good things about the region, but also some challenges that come from growth. And so, in terms of the public service background, it really was just opportunities presented itself, right? I mean, when those of us that particularly in real estate careers, it's really a small business minded kind of industry, and you create your own opportunities most of the time by showing up and saying, I'm here, I'm willing to do the work. And so I got offered opportunities to volunteer early on, 22, 23 years ago, and put my nose to the grindstone in those roles, and new and bigger opportunities just continued to present themselves over time. And each time tried to keep the same attitude of how do we get the work done for the taxpayers, for the constituents, and continue to do that today.
Nice. So with your background teaching sustainable real estate at FGCU, how have you seen our local landscape change over our lifetime? And can you touch on what is sustainable real estate?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So I'm actually a graduate of Florida Gulf Coast, 2004. Really early on, it's a much different university, frankly, than when I was going there. It was about 3,000 students, mostly commuter like myself.
Wow.
Now it's over 15,000 students, mostly live on campus, much more traditional university experience. But from the very beginning, there was a requirement that the students, all students, no matter what your major was, no matter what you were pursuing, had to have some courses in interdisciplinary exposure just to understand the bigger issues that are going on in the world, but particularly in Southwest Florida and our region. And that the coursework and the structure of it has evolved over the last 3 decades. Now it is a sustainability focus. And so all of the colleges inside the university, and the one that I teach is in the Lecker Business School, where the real estate division is held, they are all able to offer a sustainability course. And I worked with the team there to develop this. Actually, they kind of had a sketch and an outline of what they wanted, and then gave it to me almost 3 years ago now, and said, "Hey, put this together and let's make this work." And so we talk about a lot of the things that listeners could guess, environmental issues, particularly water and land use is important here. But we also talk about bigger picture questions because sustainability is also about economic sustainability. For as I tell the students, the vast majority of them are going to make one big real estate investment in their life. That's going to be their home, and they need to understand the ins and outs of what that looks like, what the economic picture looks like when you go to buy a place. What's the long-term job prospects in the region, and what's the infrastructure cost going to be, and just all the different associated issues. We explore a lot of different topics. It's really a fun class.
That's cool. That's awesome. So, for homeowners who want to understand their local government and how it actually works, what are the main responsibilities of the property appraiser's office?
We have always described, at least my predecessor did, who was here, Ken Wilkinson, almost 40 years, actually 40 years in exactly in the office. And we took up the mantle as he handed off the baton 6 years ago, that this office is an advocate for the taxpayer. We're a little different. Florida is from a lot of other states. They're probably, if you've come from out of Florida, you recognize what's called a tax assessor. They usually handle both our responsibility and the collections, which in Florida is done by a separate person, the tax collector. And they usually are an employee of the local government. They are hired and fired by the city or the county or the school district. We don't do it that way here. Here, all of the authorities, all the taxing authorities, use our office. But as you've already indicated, I'm elected by the people. So I don't work for the county. I don't work for the cities. I work for the taxpayers. And our job is to deliver a fair and equitable tax roll. So that means getting the answer right in as much as how that's developed through mass appraisal, which is a little different than the fee appraisal world that I used to serve in, because we've got 550,000 properties we have to appraise every year.
Oh, wow.
And doing it the way I did it in the private side just wouldn't be realistic. So we use a lot of mass appraisal techniques, but we make sure that it's applied fairly to all of those taxpayers. They're not being taken advantage of, and really trying to look out for them. We did a lot of work post-hurricane, for example, trying to help folks work through how to get a refund, how to get classified for the hurricane damage that they sustained, and delivering the tax savings to them.
Wow. Yeah. So, how does your experience as an expert witness and real estate valuation help make sure things stay fair for the Lee County taxpayer?
I got a lot of exposure to very interesting and unique questions. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, even in the public side. Your typical single family, 3-bed, 2-bath house in Cape Coral, our mass appraisal model is going to be pretty accurate because we've got thousands of sales of those every single year. Doing the analysis on that is relatively straightforward. It is much more difficult if you've got a unique property, right? If you own multiple acres on the Gulf of Mexico, don't have a lot of those, and those don't sell every year. Or, you've got an old piece of a train right of way. That's a unique piece of property. I mean, you think of any example you want, and those were the kind of properties I really specialized in when I was in private practice. And so bringing those that knowledge and expertise about how to approach those valuation questions, that's been very, very helpful.
And with you and your family's history of being here for 200 some years, it probably kind of helps too to really know the area and everything too with all of that. I would imagine.
Yeah, we just this morning went over all of the ag classification applications, and by and large, I know most of those families, and I know most of those properties, and
Wow.
we approved a lot, but some we can't because of whatever shortfalls in terms of their application and the process. But there's certainly there's a heightened level of familiarity in that responsibility for sure.
Yeah. So the trim notice, it's such an important document for property owners. When should Lee County taxpayers expect theirs to show up this year?
Yeah, so those are always required to go out roughly the middle of August. We have a little flexibility in the date, but to orient viewers, the tax process for local government, their tax year runs from October 1, so it's a fall cut time. So they have to finish their budgets in September. And this trim notice it provides multiple things for each taxpayer. It tells them what those local taxing authorities are looking at in terms of a potential tax rate for the year. It shows them when all the budget hearings are. So if they don't like those proposed tax rates, it gives them the contact info to go tackle that. And then it also gives them the information from our side. So what we have come up with for the year based on the prior January 1st, what was the property worth? And then what are the, particularly for most residential homeowners, did you have a homestead exemption or not? Or any of the other exemptions and classifications. But that's really from interacting with our office, the key point is, does that value look right? And do we have all the exemptions you thought that you'd applied for? Get that done then. That's a 20 plus day window to get with us. If you wait until you get the tax bill in November, we're really in a, unless there's a legal error, there's really nothing we can do, because we hand off that tax roll to the tax collector right about the 1st of October, and they have it then from that point on.
Gotcha. So for our newer residents who's never seen one before, what's the most important thing they should be looking for on that notice?
Well, particularly the ones that have intended to establish full-time residency. They need to apply for the homestead exemption. It's a massive tax savings, and if they miss the window back in the spring, it's not that it's totally out of luck, but definitely if they don't get with us before the trim period closes, then they really will have to wait until the following year to apply. That's the biggest by far. But we have a number of other exemptions under Florida law for folks that are blind, if you have permanent disability, if you're a veteran, if you're a widower. There's a lot of other opportunities. If you're involved in a nonprofit that owns a piece of property for charitable purposes, that could potentially qualify for a significant tax savings, as much as zero tax. So there's all these opportunities. They just need to reach out and talk with us, and we'll be glad to walk them through it.
Sure, yeah. I know you've kind of touched a little bit about this, but what should a homeowner do if they open their trim notice and completely disagree with the assessed value of the property? You mentioned to reach out right away. So is there a phone number, website? What do they do?
Absolutely. Well, first they want to make sure to look at the difference. So the number we're determining for January 1st is that just value, that top line. Just value is market value essentially under Florida law. And then your assessed and taxable value, and ultimately taxable is what you pay the taxes on, that depends on your exemptions. So if the exemptions are missing, you'll definitely have an issue. But if you do have a concern about any of those three, yeah, you call us. You can come into the office. You can get online, and we have a chat feature and the email as well. All the remote interactions, you're getting the same team. This is not offshore. You're not getting a robot who doesn't actually have the ability to help you. We've got a really excellent public service team that specializes in helping people navigate the questions and answering questions they didn't even know they should have asked in the first place. And you've got, as I said, a little over 20 days once the trim notice goes out to get with us. And the vast majority of interactions are resolved in what's called the informal process. That's just that conversation. Nobody knows your property better than you. You live there all year. We don't. We only get a chance to see it once a year, if that. And so that communication really, really helps. If we can't come to an agreement, you have what's called the Value Adjustment Board. That's an opportunity to file officially an appeal. That's a process that we don't manage. We participate, presenting our side of the evidence. But the separate Value Adjustment Board, which is the county commission and the school board and some citizen members, they actually hear all of those. But again, we've got a great reputation for resolving them. I think we had about 4,000 filed last year, which again is a tiny percentage of 550,000 properties.
That's true.
But we only went to hearing, I want to say less than 200. So we resolved almost 3,800 of those still through conversation even after the appeal. So we're really back to that advocate for the taxpayer role. We're trying to get the answer right from the taxpayer's perspective first and foremost.
Sure. Now, do they need to maybe look at getting a real estate attorney, or they don't need to, or should they?
It depends on the issue. Yeah. So some of the questions, if it's a value-based question, you don't have to get a valuation professional. But depending on how complicated your situation is, it'd probably be recommended. And the truth is, based on what I just described, if you can just come to us and show us what's going on in your neighborhood, and it's something we can get to agreement on, we're going to get there. So if we haven't agreed with you, probably want to get a real estate valuation professional, because there's clearly a real difference of opinion. For all the other questions are, the exemption questions. Were you a resident or were you not a resident? This is a legal question. Whether an attorney is going to help you or not, it's going to be up to the magistrate that hears the case. And I'll just be honest, we win almost all of those cases. It's very rare on the legal question cases that we come up short.
Okay, awesome. Well, we've already talked a little bit, but definitely, because it's a big one, I want to bring it back up. The homestead exemption. So saving money on property taxes is so huge for homeowners. I completely understand. As a homeowner, how does someone officially qualify for a homestead exemption here in Florida?
Yeah. So the test is just simply one of residency. And what are the normal indicators of that? You've got your driver's license in Florida. You've registered to vote in Florida. And if you've met those two, 99% of the time, you're going to get qualified. The times that don't is when we review it, and we do. We're charged legally to review all of the homestead grants. And, we can pull the same information that the magazine solicitors and advertising solicitors use. We can see that, actually, you're getting all of your mail at your vacation home in North Carolina. You never are actually here. That the easy ones are when you list it on Airbnb. We can see Airbnb.
Right.
Yeah. We can see it the same as everybody else. Long-term listings on the MLS. We see the same. We use all the same resources. And so you need the main indicators that this is where you describe to everyone is your home, and that there's nothing demonstrating the opposite. Another big thing, we do have folks that have residences in other states. It's a very normal thing. This can be your primary residence. But if your other jurisdiction is giving you some kind of residency exemption, a homestead of its kind in the other state, Florida law doesn't allow that. So you got to give up one or the other. Unfortunately, a lot of other jurisdictions aren't nearly as friendly, it seems to me. And so we've had some unfortunate circumstances where we have to take it away. We don't have an option. If, Indiana or Ohio or Wisconsin says, we're not changing the record,
mm-hmm. Right.
It's really beyond out of our hands at that point.
Gotcha. And so to be a primary residence, is it something like you have to at least be here and utilize this as your primary residence for 6 months and a day, or is it not that?
Well, that's always been kind of the buzzword in the industry. That really isn't part of the law. And so, you can think about an example. Somebody could, they've done really well in life. This is their only home they own, but they go take a cruise around the world on the Queen Mary. Yeah, right. But that's, for those that don't know, that's like an 8-month cruise. But you would still be, you're still a Florida resident. That's still your primary residence. That's where your mail comes. That's where you identify, right? You're not residing, quote unquote. So it's really a fact-specific evaluation. And again, for most people, it's going to be very straightforward. Driver's license here, you vote here. That's going to cover 98% of our exemptions. It's really the weird subset of interesting circumstances. We've had a real challenge over the last few years. A lot more people whose spouse is not a Florida resident, and that creates a little bit of a sticky wicket, because most people probably don't think this much about it, but when you're married, marriage is not a 50-50 ownership. You both own 100% of all of your marital property. That's why you can't just you can't just dissolve those easily. It takes a process when you get divorced, because both of you own 100% of everything. And in that scenario, all right, you got a spouse that doesn't live here, but they own 100% of your home at the same time. So we've got we've got a couple hundred of those cases this year. We got to go through each one by one, deal with some case law on And it just totally depends on what is the exact situation with you and your spouse.
Sure, sure. And I'm sure each one is going to be unique in itself too.
It is. Every single one of them is. I mean, do they own property somewhere else? That makes it more complicated. If your spouse is, their job's in London and they're renting an apartment there, that's pretty straightforward, right? Like this is clearly your homestead is here. You've got the old house in New Jersey, and that's really their home. And like, okay, which one of these is actually y'all's home together? It gets to be difficult.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit too. Beyond the standard exemption, are there other tax savings or portability benefits Lee County residents should know about? I know you mentioned a few.
Well, portability is again the biggest one. It's related to your homestead. You get a cap on the assessment, so the just value can go up or down. Just depends on what the market does. But once you have your homestead, Save Our Homes limits the assessment to only go up 3% a year. Well, in a good market, just value and assessed value end up pretty far apart. And then you decide, hey, the kids are all going off to college. Let's downsize to that condo, but you've got all these tax savings built up over here at the house. What do? Florida lets you the portability, port that difference to your new residence. And if you're truly downsizing, it's a percentage, and if you're upsizing, it's the whole number up to $500,000 in value. That's an enormous benefit, and kind of a knock on that people don't realize that you get from the homestead. Again, so many other ones. Again, blind, widower, disabled, veterans, all those have different criteria for qualification. And the big ones, the zero tax for schools and churches and libraries and museums and charitable purposes in general, right? If you've gotten together as a neighborhood and bought a lot and made it a community garden, and you've got a 501c that owns that qualifies. That property is being used for the benefit of the community. Come see us. Let's get rid of your tax liability.
That'd be cool. Yeah. So I have to bring this up, and I know you probably know what I'm thinking about. The November ballot. Um, just to brief the audience before I let you weigh in, I want to share a few details with everyone listening so we're all on the same page. This amendment goes to a vote on November 3rd, and it needs 60% approval to pass. If it does pass, it would raise the homestead exemption from $50,000 to $150,000 in 2027, and then up to $250,000 in 2028 for non-school taxes. New residents moving to Florida on or after January 1st, 2027 would have to meet a 5-year residency requirement before they can qualify for that bigger exemption. And the cap on yearly assessment increases for non-homestead properties like vacation investment homes would drop from 10% down to 5%. So Matt, the big concern I keep hearing from a lot of people is they're worried that if this passes, there won't be enough funding left for our local services, things like our first responders, schools, and roads. What's your honest opinion on that? And do you think the funding will still be there?
Well, there's a lot to unpack. The first thing for folks that, again, not super familiar with Florida, property tax is in our state constitution. So it can't be changed just year to year with a simple law change in the regular session. That protects local government because that's their primary source of revenue. That's why, because I always get asked, why do we have to vote on these property tax things? It seems like every 2 years. And it's because they can't change it. They have to ask us so that it's stable, it's predictable, it gives you a real reliance interest as a property owner about what the situation is going to be year to year. Now, in terms of what's being proposed, right? So there's 4 big things there. The increase in the homestead, particularly the 150, there's no argument against it. Inflation has made the old 50,000 homestead worth less than what it should be. And if you just adjust for inflation, it should be around 125 to 150. So totally good. I think if that was the only thing on the ballot, not the rest of it, this would pass 85, 90% because nobody can argue with the inflation adjustment. I think the harder question is going so quickly in 2 years to 250. It's a huge taxable hit. So like in Lee County, that's about 20% of the tax roll is going to be lost. And if you do simple math, if you don't find another way to get revenue outside of property tax and you don't have the option to cut. Just depends on the evaluation, say, the commission has to go through. A 20% cut in the tax base means a 40% increase in the tax rate. So everybody else that's above that 250, or everybody that owns commercial property, is going to see their millage go up by 40% just to keep the same amount of money, revenue available. So it's going to cause a lot of heartburn, a lot of consternation, be a lot of conflict points if this passes. What you're not going to hear me, though, argue for is, cry me a river right about government. Government, and the truth is, government will figure it out. It will be painful. It will require some hard choices. It may mean that, I don't see realistically you're not going to have fire and police, but it is going to mean less people manning the parks. It's going to mean less maintenance at the non-essential facilities. It's going to take longer to get the money together to replace the lights at the ball field. All those things that you don't have to do, they go to the bottom of the list when the money gets tighter. And what I'm most worried about for the taxpayers is, let me touch on one last point on what's in the amendment. The 5-year residency. This is a debate. I come down on the side it's unconstitutional. At the federal level, it's an equal protection question. We can't tell new residents they have to wait 5 years before they can vote. We can't tell them they have to wait 5 years before they can buy property. Once you become a Florida resident, you have to be treated the same as all other Florida residents. That's been pretty consistent in Supreme Court case law. So it throws a big question mark. We don't know, are they going to just throw that portion out? It's going to get litigated. Do they throw the whole amendment out? Maybe we don't even get to vote on it in November. I know the arguments why they included it, but it made it more complicated. The other thing that I am worried about is there's no gate on the back end to prevent local governments from increasing taxes, property taxes, that aren't based on the value. So there's really, that people forget, there's two kinds of property tax. There's your millage. We talked about all that concept and the trim process, but there's the non-ad valorem assessments. Everybody in Lee County pays your garbage bill. No matter where you live, everybody pays your garbage bill at the bottom of the bill. And it's not based on how much your house is worth. It's just, I think this year, $500 or $600 if you have a house, no matter how big or small. There's no limit on what local government, counties and cities and districts can do in that category. They could move all of the taxes for fire, for police, for stormwater, for irrigation, for parks. They could move all that to the bottom of the bill. And those don't have any protections for widows and the blind and the disabled. It has no homestead protection. So, it doesn't require it, right? If you vote yes on the amendment, it doesn't require that happen. But I can sit here pretty safely and guarantee at least more than one city and county is going to increase those fees on that side. And if you are a low income taxpayer, you could end up with a higher tax bill 2-3 years from now because all of those have been moved over and they don't have the protections on them.
So you say bottom of the tax bill. So what's the difference of ad valorem and non-ad valorem taxes? Can you go over that?
Yeah, so the fun part about property appraisal, we still use a lot of Latin. Like the tax roll is called the cadaster. People might have heard of a cadastral survey. That's the GIS system. And it's an interesting, that's something that's been a part of Western government for 2,000 years, right? So this is a role that's existed for at least since the Romans. And the same thing in the tax. So ad valorem means of value. And so non-ad valorem means not of value, right? So the ad valorem taxes is all based on the value of your home. Then the millage is the tax rate. That's again, some Latin there based on thousands, but it's the tax rate that you multiply against the value to get what you owe for taxes. The bottom of the bill gets the non-ad valorem. And so it has nothing to do with the value, has none of the protections of the exemptions. Everybody pays it. So I already today, right now, I get calls from pretty upset taxpayers in the city of Cape Coral. The city uses the most non-ad valorem of any jurisdiction right now. And so like a 100% totally disabled veteran pays zero ad valorem taxes, but he's paying about $3,000 a year in non-ad valorem taxes. And I think more of that is probably going to happen based on the structure of this amendment. And it's going to, if citizens vote yes and it passes, they're going to have to be serious about engaging with their commissioners and their council people to say how they want the revenue shortfall to then be addressed if they don't want to be paying those taxes on the back end.
A lot of good stuff here.
There's a lot to it. I mean, this is my wheelhouse, right? So I've been working a lot. One of my roles I view for myself in this office is doing things like this. So I do all the communications, try to do this. Right now, I'm doing about one a day because of this conversation, but also going back and forth to Tallahassee and advocating for property tax reform, trying to help the legislators and the governor's office understand what would be some real positive moves. There's a lot more that could have been done. I'm honestly a little frustrated that a lot of stuff got left on the cutting room floor that I think could have made this an even better amendment for the voters to consider.
Gotcha. Wow. Yeah, it's it's a tough one because
Yeah.
I'm for it, but then there's parts I'm not so sure that I'm for it, and everything. And just talking with you, it's like, wow, it's not a simple, easy question, is it? But I definitely agree. The 50,000. I actually did some history because I was like, it's been forever since it's been 50,000 for the homestead exemption, and I pulled up the history. In 1980, Florida voters increased the homestead exemption to 25,000, and then it was 2006 when it went to 50,000. So
Mm-hmm.
20 years has passed. Wow. Anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the original was adopted in 1934. It was 5,000. And well, what's interesting is it's hard to get exact stats from 90 some odd years ago, but more or less the average home was less than $4,500.
Right.
So
Yeah.
most homeowners paid no taxes under the original homestead, and that's a really strong argument from a policy standpoint. For the effect, that would be like a $400,000 homestead. If you think about the average home price now in Florida is around 330, 350. We're a little higher, obviously, in our market here. Don't think we could get to a $400,000 homestead from a revenue picture. And of course, the state's a lot different. In 1934, there was no professional fire service. There were no paved highways. Schools were basically volunteer co-ops with a single room schoolhouse.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a much different picture today.
Definitely. Definitely, we have a lot more amenities, if you want to use that word. Nice paved roads and yeah. Wow, looking ahead, with all the growth that we're seeing in Southwest Florida, what's the smartest move a property owner can make today to manage their long-term tax situation?
It's still going to be that the homestead exemption, even with the infirmities that we talked about, the ways it needs to be improved. It's the single biggest tax saver. Beyond our situation, you always want to encourage people to think about how they organize their assets. This is not my legal advice, but people ask all the time about trusts and how to deal with inheritance in the long term. Getting that resolved sooner than later is always a positive. You definitely want to talk with our office. Say, for example, if you do move it into a trust, as long as you are still the beneficiary, the law views that as no change. Obviously, the legal name has changed on the title, but it's no change because you're still the equitable interest holder. If, though, and this is a caution, if you go ahead and make your kids, for example, the beneficiaries, so they're actually in charge of the property, you're just living there, that's actually a change. So that will reset all of the tax savings. It's not your home anymore, so you wouldn't be the homestead exempt qualifier. So you definitely want to have a conversation with your tax planning folks and have a conversation with us. I mean, we're here to help. We've seen 1,000 of these examples, some really quirky and interesting ones. We have some. I'm sure everybody's familiar between Sanibel, Captiva, and Boca. We have some pretty high net worth folks who have very complicated situations, and those especially, we encourage them. Let's have a talk, because your tax professional may live in New York or LA and not really understand all of the nuances of your property tax implications here in Florida.
Right. So you said if you have a property and it's just in your name and then you want to put it into a trust, it's still not changing ownership, basically.
Yeah, as long as you're the beneficiary, as long as you still have the control of the trust.
Okay, but if you put it in a trust, let's say Heather Hitz Living Trust with a beneficiary of, I don't have any kids, so I'm going to say my niece and nephew.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
it's technically,
their property.
wow, okay.
Hmm.
I didn't
Yeah,
know
because
that.
it's up to it's then their control. They could sell it if they want to.
I'd be like, no, you can't.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's
Okay.
a that. Yeah, I mean, the whole point of trust is obviously to pre-evaluate your estate, so you don't have to go through probate. So you're going to identify who's the inheritor of the property, but you need to still maintain control in order to not have a reset of all your tax savings.
Gotcha. Okay.
And there's other we're not going to go down all the
No, we're
rabbit
not.
holes of LLC ownership and corporate ownership. There's ways to do things and structure things. Again, if you're in that position and for liability you want to have some buffer between your personal assets and your ownerships, just give us a call and talk through it. Like I'd encourage people, if you're going to buy commercial property and you're going to put in an LLC, do it from day one, because when you move it from your personal name to the LLC, that resets all of the non-homestead cap savings, and you don't want to lose that.
I heard also if you're purchasing even residential and you plan on, let's say down the road, put it in a trust, it's best that you do it right at the very beginning too. Is that not true? Or
I mean, again, depending on how the trust is structured, most of them, the typical ones, aren't going to be a reset. But again, it's always, if you're going to do it, that's just probably good advice in general, because that's one of those things you just say I'm going to do that, then you never get around to doing it.
right? That's very true. Yes. But it's definitely a whole nother podcast. I'm gonna have.
Yeah, and I am not a
Trust is
tax
a lot.
attorney. Just again for
Exactly.
disclosure, don't rely on somebody's going to come and call me into court and say I
Right.
heard you say on the podcast
Matt
do
said
this.
this. Oh boy. Yep, definitely. Well, I want to ask you this and stuff, but just kind of curious. Let's say November 3rd, it does pass. What do you expect? What would happen to properties owner? What can they expect to see happen?
Yeah, so in the first year, the new homestead exemption is automatic. So the 50 goes, and it's actually about 55 this year because we did add an inflation adjuster just a couple years ago. So that has started to move forward, and that would carry. So the 150 and actually the 250 would adjust for inflation starting in 28 going forward as well. So we at least have solved that problem of not having an inflation consideration. So the 150 would go into effect automatically. You would see a larger exemption, so less taxable value in your personal residence, and it would present the local government a decision. So part of in advance of that trim process, you think about the calendar. We give June 1st. We give a countywide estimate of where we think everything is going to be, more or less. It's the early estimate. July 1st, we're getting prepared for this right now, is our official estimate that we then deliver to all the fire districts, the school district, the cities, the counties. Everybody then gets their number that applies to their jurisdiction. And we develop for them what's called the rollback rate. People may have heard of that. And it's an analysis of how much money did you raise last year? How much is your taxable value for the whole county, let's say this year? What would be the tax rate you have to adopt to get the exact same amount of tax revenue? And most years, because Florida goes up in value, we grow. People call it a rollback rate because usually that's a lower tax rate because the value went up, same amount of money. It's but it's just a multiplication and division question. So if the taxable value goes down because now we've exempted all of these properties, which at the 150 would be like let's just say a 10% reduction in the taxable base, the formula is going to say here's a roll up rate, a higher millage rate to raise the same amount of revenue, and that will be the inflection point. They'll get the trim notice in August of 27, and it will show these roll up rates, and the taxpayers will have to decide if are they okay with that. I mean, they're getting a bigger savings. That probably is, that's being shifted now to your commercial property owners. If you don't like that, if you think they should adopt last year's rate, which would mean a true loss of actual money, then you got to go to the commission meeting and the council meeting and testify in the budget hearings to say, here's what we want. So people ask, hey, exactly how does this look 5 years from now or 10 years from now? It's a very dynamic question. It totally depends. After year one, it depends on what each of those cities and counties and districts decide to do with their tax rate, whether they decide to move to non-ad valorem. The counties and cities have options for sales tax as well. So
Mm-hmm.
what do they do in response means the question's really hard to tell you after year one.
Interesting. Now, does the counties have to vote on that?
The county commission or the city council, they vote on the actual tax rate. If they propose new taxes, those will go to a referendum. And so in 2028, they would see potentially referendums for different kinds of taxes then to make up the loss. And it'll be jurisdiction by jurisdiction, right? We have 67 counties, 411 cities, somewhere north of 3,000 special districts in the state. So it's a lot of folks moving a lot of cheese in a lot of different places all at the same time.
Right, right. So much good nuggets. I appreciate you taking the time and explaining all of that stuff, and I know I definitely learned some good stuff. So I hope my listeners do too. Yeah, I think you answered all my questions. I really appreciate you taking the time and stuff explaining this in layman's term, and didn't know you have to have a Latin background.
It takes a little getting used to for sure, but it's fun. We got a lot of quirky terms, but they're straightforward once you start to kind of think about them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, so since you are a seventh generation Floridian, I have to ask you, what's your favorite local gem hidden spot here in Southwest Florida?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many. If you're asking me where can you get some old school barbecue, probably Smoking Pit on Old 41 in North Fort Myers would be the go-to. In fact, we do a quarterly luncheon with all of the people that have hit a 5-year milestone, and I have them bring in Smoking Pit for our luncheon. But there's so many neat places. You go out to Matt Lachey and Pine Island and get yourself some smoked mullet and get a chance to wade the flats there at Pineland. Go in the wintertime because it's a little muggy and buggy this time of year. Go out to the islands and get a chance to see. I mean, a lot of people don't realize we've got all these islands off the west coast of Cape Coral. It's like a mini extension of the Keys. I hesitate to tell them all that because now people are going to show up there. But it's beautiful. But go downtown. Go to the Edison home. Go down and visit Corkscrew Swamp and take a swamp walk. That's a little far for some people. Go out to 6 Mile Cypress and they've got a boardwalk right there off the Parkway where you can get out and see everything that's just so cool about this
It's
place.
amazing our wildlife here. I mean, I came from Michigan and stuff, and I've been here for 16 years now. But it's amazing. Like, well, one, I first coming here, I saw a sign for the panther, and I'm like, Florida has
Yep.
panthers.
Yep. We
And
have wild
everything.
lions running around in the woods.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So it's pretty amazing, and yeah, there's definitely a lot of great spots and everything. So are you a big golfer or a fisher?
Probably fishermen more than I've got golf clubs. You can't live in Southwest Florida and not have them. But much more. If you ask me which one, we'd be going fishing.
Okay. Where's your favorite fishing spot?
Yeah, Pine Island Sound. You got a lot of opportunities, a lot of options, and it's a little farther out from kind of the heavy boat traffic. Not that we don't love them, but the river gets pretty busy. I think we still hold the record as one of the highest per capita boat registrations in the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, you think about all the miles of canals there in Cape Coral.
That's true.
Every single house has a boat behind it.
Definitely,
Yeah.
almost for sure. Well, it is interesting because yeah, when I first moved here and stuff and learning the area, and I heard that Cape Coral has more canals than Venice, Italy, and I was just like, that's crazy. So yeah, that makes sense that there's a ton of boats.
The
That's for
Venice,
sure.
the Venice of the South.
Yeah.
Other than the Venice that is Venice north of us.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
It's too funny. I love it. Well, Matt, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your knowledge that you shared with us today. And yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. And until next time,
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Have a great day.
you too. Bye bye. That's a wrap on today's episode of Real Hits of Real Estate. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss a beat. Join the conversation on social media and let me know what topics you love covered. Stay tuned for more expert advice and local finds coming your way. I'm Heather Hitz with RE/MAX Realty Group, and whether you're buying, selling, or simply planning your next chapter, I'm here to help you make your next move your best move. Until then, make it a Hits experience.